Monica Reed's phone hit the bathroom floor the second she read the pregnancy test positive, and the father was a billionaire who'd already forgotten she existed. 5 years later, she'd watched that same man step out of a black SUV at a playground, his eyes locking onto the 4 faces that would end the life she'd built in hiding. The running was over. Jonathan Pierce's hands went numb the second he saw them, 4 children circling a woman in a sunflower yellow dress, and every single one of them had his face. The playground went silent in his mind as the truth detonated. Monica, his ex-maid who vanished 5 years ago, had been hiding something bigger than he could have imagined. And judging by the way she stiffened when their eyes met, she knew this moment would destroy everything. Before we continue this wonderful story, click subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So, let me know where you're listening from. Now let's get to where the story began. 5 years of buried mistakes were about to surface in the worst place possible, beneath the judgment-free laughter of children and the unforgiving brightness of a Miami afternoon. As a man who'd built empires faced the family he'd erased from memory, the sleek black SUV glided through Coral Gables like a shadow, its tinted windows reflecting palm trees and pastel-colored homes. Jonathan Pierce sat in the back seat, tailored gray suit pristine, Rolex catching the filtered sunlight, but behind his sharp jawline and calculated composure lived the restlessness of a man who just watched his board meeting implode. The merger was collapsing, and investors were whispering about his priorities. The irony cut deep. The man known as Miami's Silicon Ghost, invisible, untouchable, all business, was now being questioned for having no life outside the boardroom. "Mr. Pierce, we can reroute back to the office," his driver offered, eyes meeting Jonathan's in the rearview mirror. "Traffic's clearing up on the expressway." "No." Jonathan's tone was ice. "Stay on this route. I need to think." He leaned back against the leather, briefcase open on his lap, fingers already scrolling through damage control emails. The world outside blurred into irrelevance, joggers, couples, a stretch of green park fencing. Then came the sound, children's laughter, high and carefree, spilling through the cracked window like an accusation. It made him pause, just for a heartbeat, remembering a version of himself that might have wanted this tiny hands. Sunday mornings, someone waiting at home who actually cared. He'd imagined it once, vaguely, distantly, before ambition swallowed everything else. He shook it off. That life wasn't his, had never been, until the SUV slowed near the playground, and Jonathan saw her. Monica. The name hit him like a physical blow, dragging him back through 5 years in the span of a single breath. Back to polished marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. Back to a penthouse that had everything except warmth. Back to the woman who'd moved through his life like a ghost he'd chosen not to see. 5 years ago, Monica Reed had arrived on a Tuesday morning with a reference letter and eyes that gave nothing away. The agency had called her exceptional, code for invisible, efficient, and smart enough not to ask questions. Jonathan barely looked up from his laptop when the housekeeper introduced her. Another face in the rotation of staff who kept his life running while he focused on what mattered. Deals, acquisitions, the next billion-dollar play. She was Jamaican, soft-spoken, and moved with the kind of careful quietness that came from years of being told not to take up space. She cleaned his office while he worked, prepared meals he barely tasted, restocked the bar he drank from alone. For 3 months, she was furniture, until the night his marriage finally shattered. Rachel had served him with divorce papers over breakfast, not in person, but through her attorney, who'd shown up at 7 with a leather portfolio and a smug smile. The terms were brutal, the accusations worse: infidelity, neglect, emotional abandonment. None of it was technically false. Jonathan had spent that evening in his office, staring at the skyline, whiskey glass untouched in his hand. The penthouse felt cavernous. 4,200 square feet of designer emptiness, every surface cold and pristine. Monica had knocked softly before entering. "I can come back, Mr. Pierce," she'd said, hesitating in the doorway with fresh linens folded in her arms. "No." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Stay, please." She'd paused, then moved into the room, setting the linens on the chair. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the city glittered like broken glass. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "About your wife." "Don't be." Jonathan laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "She's right to leave. I gave her every reason." Monica didn't respond with empty platitudes or scripted sympathy. She just stood there, present in a way no one else had been in years. And maybe it was the exhaustion, or the whiskey he'd finally started drinking, or the way she looked at him not with pity, but with understanding that made him start talking. He told her things he'd never told anyone, about the pressure, the isolation, the slow erosion of becoming the kind of man people feared but never loved. Monica listened, her hands folded in front of her, her expression soft but steady. "You're not as empty as you think you are," she'd said eventually. "How would you know?" "Because empty people don't hurt like this." The words had cracked something open in him, something dangerous and desperate. It happened 3 weeks later. A storm had rolled in off the Atlantic, turning the sky black and the rain relentless. The power flickered twice before surrendering entirely, plunging the penthouse into darkness except for the glow of the city below. Jonathan found Monica in the kitchen, lighting candles with hands that trembled slightly. "Are you afraid of storms?" he asked. She looked up, candlelight catching in her dark eyes. "Only the ones I can't see coming." He'd meant to leave, to go back to his office, pour another drink, maintain the distance he'd spent a lifetime perfecting. But instead, he stayed. They talked for hours in the flickering darkness about her life in Jamaica, her dreams of going back to school, the sacrifices she'd made to send money home. She told him about loneliness, the kind that came from being seen but never known. He told her he understood that more than she realized. When the kiss happened, neither of them could say who moved first. It was reckless and wrong, and fueled by a mutual ache that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with not wanting to be alone. Not for one night. Afterward, lying in sheets that smelled like rain and regret, Jonathan stared at the ceiling while Monica's breathing slowed beside him. "This can't happen again," he said to the darkness. "I know," she whispered back. By morning, the storm had passed. Jonathan left for a business trip to New York, telling himself it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness. By the time he returned 4 days later, Monica was gone. The agency said she'd resigned, effective immediately. No forwarding address, no explanation. He'd felt relief, if he was honest. Relief that the evidence of his lapse had simply vanished. He'd buried the memory beneath spreadsheets and boardroom victories, convincing himself it had meant nothing. He never asked where she went. He never tried to find her. Monica had taken a pregnancy test in a gas station bathroom 3 weeks after leaving the penthouse. She'd known before the second line appeared. Known from the exhaustion that felt different from the usual weight of survival. Known from the way her body had started changing in small, undeniable ways. The plastic stick trembled in her hand as she stared at the result. Pregnant. Not possible. Except it was. Entirely, devastatingly possible. She thought about calling him. Drafted the text message 4 times, fingers hovering over the send button. "I need to tell you something." But every time she imagined his response, the denial, the accusations, the cold legal machinery that would grind her into nothing, she deleted the words. Men like Jonathan Pierce didn't have consequences. People like Monica Reed did. She walked out of that bathroom, climbed into her borrowed car, and drove until Miami disappeared in her rearview mirror. Later that night, in a motel room that smelled like disinfectant and defeated dreams, Monica opened the pregnancy test one more time, stared at those 2 lines, then wrapped it in tissue and threw it in the trash, along with her phone. She would disappear completely. She would raise this child or children, as the first ultrasound would reveal, alone. And Jonathan Pierce would never know the life he'd created and abandoned in a single careless night. Until today. Until the playground. Until 4 pairs of hazel eyes turned toward a sleek black SUV and changed everything. Monica's apartment was nothing like Jonathan's penthouse. No marble floors or bay views, no staff gliding through rooms like choreographed dancers. Just 800 square feet of worn carpet, mismatched furniture, and walls thin enough that she could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's telenovelas bleeding through from next door. But it was hers. More importantly, it was theirs. She stood at the kitchen sink that evening, hands submerged in soapy water, watching through the window as Eli and Noah chased each other around the small courtyard below. Ava sat on the steps, reading, always reading, while Lila tried to braid dandelions into a crown that kept falling apart. 5 years of this. 5 years of making something beautiful out of fear and impossible odds. The apartment complex in Little Havana had become home, not because it was comfortable, but because it was anonymous. A place where single mothers and immigrant families stacked their dreams on top of each other in concrete towers, where no one asked too many questions and everyone understood the unspoken rule. We all have something we're running from. Monica had learned to live small, to keep her head down, her children close, her past buried. Most days, she almost believed it was enough. The first year had been survival in its rawest form. 4 infants, 1 woman, no support system. Monica worked 3 jobs in those early months, cleaning offices at night, watching someone else's children during the day, doing alterations on weekends. She slept in 90-minute increments between feedings, her body running on adrenaline and the terrifying knowledge that if she failed, there was no safety net. No family to call, no father to share the load. Just her and 4 tiny lives that depended entirely on her not collapsing. She'd named them carefully: Eli, Ascension; Noah, Rest; Ava, Life; Lila, Night. Names that meant something. Names that belonged to them, not to the man whose DNA they carried, but who'd never earned the right to claim them. The children knew their father was gone. That's what Monica had told them when they were old enough to ask. Not dead exactly, but somewhere unreachable, somewhere safe and abstract. Daddy's in heaven, Ava had said once, matter of fact, at preschool, when another child asked why only Mommy came to pick up. Monica hadn't corrected her. It was easier than the truth. Your father is a millionaire who lives 20 minutes away and doesn't know you exist because I was too afraid he'd either take you from me or treat you like shameful mistakes. By year 3, life had found a rhythm. Monica had managed to reduce her jobs to 2, a position at a medical billing office and weekend shifts at a bakery. The pay was barely enough, but it meant she could be home for bedtime most nights, could help with homework, could show up to the school performances and parent-teacher conferences that marked the architecture of childhood. She learned their languages. Eli, her gentle giant, who collected rocks and spoke to stray cats like they were old friends. Noah, sharp-eyed and suspicious, already protective of his sisters in a way that made Monica's heart ache because she recognized whose trait that was. Ava, lost in books and questions, who wanted to know how everything worked and why the sky changed colors. Lila, her wildfire, who danced through rooms and declared she'd be a superhero when she grew up. They were everything. Her entire world compressed into 4 small bodies that smelled like baby shampoo and grass stains. Some nights, after they were asleep, Monica would stand in the doorway of their shared bedroom, 2 sets of bunk beds crammed into a space meant for one, and feel something dangerously close to peace. She'd done this. Against all odds, she'd kept them safe, fed, loved. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that had to be enough. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Monica found it wedged in the doorframe when she got home from work, sandwiched between a credit card offer and a flyer for a new pizza place. No postage, no return address. Just her name written in block letters across a plain white envelope. Something cold settled in her stomach. She waited until the kids were occupied, Eli and Noah building a blanket fort, The girls arguing over which movie to watch before opening it in the kitchen. The message was typed, 5 words on stark white paper. They're his, and he's going to find out. The paper slipped from her fingers. Monica's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at those words, reading them again and again, as if repetition might change their meaning. She checked the envelope. Nothing. No signature. No clue who'd sent it or how they'd found her. But the threat was clear. Someone knew. Someone had connected the dots between Jonathan Pierce and 4 5-year-olds in Little Havana. Someone wanted her to know that her carefully constructed walls were about to come crashing down. Rachel. The name arrived in her mind fully formed, bringing with it the memory of cold blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. Jonathan's ex-wife had always been watching, always calculating. Monica had felt it even back then, the weight of that woman's scrutiny, the sense that nothing in that penthouse went unnoticed. Had she known all along? Had she been waiting, gathering evidence, preparing for the perfect moment to strike? Monica's hands trembled as she crumpled the letter and shoved it deep into the trash. Her mind raced through contingency plans she'd rehearsed 1,000 times but prayed she'd never need. Grab the kids, empty the emergency account, disappear again, this time for good. But even as she thought it, she knew running was no longer an option. The children had school, friends, lives that couldn't be uprooted without causing damage. And Monica was so tired of running, so tired of looking over her shoulder and jumping at shadows. "Mummy," Lila's voice cut through the spiral. "Can we have popcorn?" Monica turned, forcing her face into something resembling calm. "Sure, baby. Give me a minute." She looked at her daughter, bright-eyed, trusting, completely unaware that their entire world was about to shift. Then she looked at the trash can where the letter lay buried beneath coffee grounds and banana peels. Someone knew. And if Jonathan didn't already, he would soon. The only question was whether Monica told him first or waited for the bomb to detonate. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office on the 42nd floor, city lights sprawling beneath him like a circuit board, and replayed the playground scene frame by frame. The sunflower yellow dress, Monica's protective stance, 4 children who carried his features like accusations. The resemblance wasn't coincidental. Couldn't be. He'd built an empire on pattern recognition, on seeing connections others missed. And these connections were undeniable. The angle of the boy's jaw, the way the girls tilted their heads when they listened, even the spacing of their eyes. All of it echoed back at him like looking into fractured mirrors. They're mine. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like waking up from a 5-year coma to discover he'd been sleepwalking through his own life. By Tracer. He'd made a decision. He needed answers. And he needed them before his world, already precarious after the failed merger, collapsed entirely. Jonathan started with the staffing agency. "Monica Reed," he said into the phone the next morning, his assistant hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Jamaican national. Worked for me 5 years ago. I need her file." The woman on the other end hesitated. "Mr. Pierce, I'm not sure we can. I'm not asking." His voice dropped to the tone that had closed billion-dollar deals. "Find it." The file arrived by courier 2 hours later. Jonathan dismissed his assistant and spread the contents across his desk with hands that weren't quite steady. Employment history, reference letters, a photocopy of her passport. But the forwarding address listed was in Kingston, Jamaica, an apartment complex the agency claimed she'd returned to after resigning. Jonathan made another call. This one to a private investigator he'd used for corporate due diligence. "I need you to verify a location," he said, discreetly. The investigator called back before lunch. "The Kingston address is a dead end," the man reported. "Building manager says no one by that name has lived there in over a decade. If your Monica Reed went to Jamaica, she didn't stay long. Or more likely, she never went at all." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, pieces clicking into place. She'd lied to the agency, vanished deliberately, and if she'd gone to such lengths to disappear, she was hiding something. Or someone. 4 someones. His phone buzzed. Rachel's name lit up the screen. Jonathan stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "What do you want, Rachel? Is that any way to greet your ex-wife?" Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "I heard about Singapore. Such a shame. Though I can't say I'm surprised. Investors do tend to notice when a CEO seems distracted." "I'm hanging up." "Wait." The sweetness vanished. "I'm calling because I'm concerned. You've been acting strange, Jonathan. Canceling meetings, making unusual inquiries. It's not like you." Ice crept down his spine. "How would you know what I've been doing?" "Miami's a small town for people like us." She paused. "Especially when old ghosts start surfacing. Tell me, have you been reminiscing about the help lately?" The help? She meant Monica. "This conversation is over." "Jonathan," Rachel's voice hardened, "whatever you're digging into, be very careful. Some things are better left buried. For everyone's sake." She hung up before he could respond. Jonathan set the phone down slowly, mind racing. Rachel knew something. The way she'd emphasized ghosts, the pointed reference to staff, it wasn't speculation. She had information. The question was, how much, and what she planned to do with it. By Thursday, Jonathan had an address. The investigator had tracked utility bills, cross-referenced school enrollment records, followed digital breadcrumbs. Most people didn't know they left. Monica Reed hadn't vanished completely. She'd just learned to live in the margins. Little Havana, an apartment complex called Vista del Sol that had probably been optimistically named decades ago. Jonathan drove there himself, dismissing his driver for the day. He parked a block away, feeling ridiculous and reckless in equal measure. The neighborhood was a world away from Coral Gables, cramped buildings with peeling paint, laundry strung between balconies, the smell of cooking oil, and exhaust hanging in the humid air. He sat there for an hour, watching, questioning his sanity. Then he saw them. The 4 children burst out of a ground-floor apartment like champagne from a shaken bottle, all noise and motion and unbridled energy. 2 boys racing ahead, 2 girls following at a more measured pace, one of them clutching a book like a talisman. Jonathan's breath caught. Up close, or as close as he could get, without revealing himself, the resemblance was even more striking. The way one of the boys gestured with his hands when he talked, the focused concentration on the reading girl's face, mannerisms Jonathan recognized from his own childhood photos, genetic echoes that couldn't be faked or coincidental. These weren't just children who looked like him. They were him. Pieces of his DNA walking around in small bodies, living lives he knew nothing about. The realization hit him with unexpected force, not anger or resentment, but something more complicated, a sense of loss for something he'd never known he was missing. 5 years of birthday candles and first words and scraped knees. 5 years of a story he hadn't been part of writing. I should have found her, he thought. I should have tried. Then Monica appeared. She stepped out of the apartment in scrubs. She must work at a hospital or clinic, her hair pulled back, exhaustion written across her features. But when the children swarmed her, her whole face transformed. She laughed at something one of them said, ruffled another's hair, crouched down to retie a shoelace. Jonathan had never seen her like this. Animated, free, alive in a way she never had been in his penthouse. He watched as she herded them toward an aging sedan, distributing backpacks and settling arguments with practiced efficiency. A complete life he'd had no idea existed. The car pulled away from the curb. Jonathan made a split-second decision. He started his engine and followed. Not close enough to be obvious, but near enough to keep them in sight. His heart hammered with something between guilt and desperation. He knew this was crossing a line from curiosity into something darker, more invasive, but he couldn't stop. 5 years of questions demanded answers, and Monica, whether she liked it or not, was the only one who could give them to him. The sedan turned left. Jonathan followed, his expensive car conspicuous in this neighborhood, but his attention too focused to care. Whatever came next, whatever confrontation awaited, one thing was certain. The past he'd buried was alive, breathing, and about to demand everything he'd spent 5 years refusing to give. Monica knew she was being followed before she reached the second stoplight. The black Mercedes kept 3 car lengths back, but she'd spent 5 years watching for threats in rearview mirrors. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she glanced at the kids in the back. Eli and Noah arguing over a toy. Ava reading. Lila humming to herself, all of them blissfully unaware. She could lose him, take a sudden turn, disappear into the maze of side streets she knew by heart. But something stopped her. Maybe exhaustion, maybe inevitability, or maybe the cold certainty that running had finally stopped being an option. The letter had made that clear. Monica pulled into the parking lot of a shuttered strip mall 2 blocks from her apartment, killed the engine, told the kids to stay in the car and lock the doors. "Mommy?" Ava looked up from her book, sensing tension. 2 minutes, baby. I promise." Monica stepped out into the fading daylight and waited. The Mercedes pulled in 30 seconds later. The door opened, and Jonathan Pierce emerged like an accusation-made flesh suit jacket discarded, tie loosened, looking more undone than she'd ever seen him. "You were following me," she said flatly. "I needed to talk to you." "So, you stalked me to my home? Near my children?" "Our children." The words came out raw. "They're mine, aren't they?" Monica's jaw tightened. Around them, the empty parking lot felt like a stage set for a confrontation 5 years overdue. "You need to leave." "I will, after you answer one question." Jonathan took a step closer, and she saw something in his eyes she didn't recognize: desperation. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because men like you don't want complications." Her voice was steady, rehearsed. "You want clean exits and plausible deniability. I gave you both. That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out like a laugh. "You want to talk about fair? I was your employee, Jonathan. I was alone in a foreign country, pregnant with 4 babies, and the father was a millionaire with lawyers and power, and an ex-wife who—" She stopped herself, but not quickly enough. Jonathan's eyes sharpened. "What about Rachel?" Monica looked away. At the car where 4 small faces pressed against the windows, watching. At the sun sinking below the horizon, dragging the last of her secrets into the light. She knew, Monica said quietly, or she suspected. Even back then, they didn't talk in front of the children. Monica drove home with Jonathan following again, this time by agreement. She got the kids settled with dinner and a movie, then met him outside on the building's front steps, where the music from someone's apartment and the smell of frying plantains created a strange soundtrack for the conversation that would unravel everything. "Start from the beginning," Jonathan said. So she did. She told him about the last few weeks at the penthouse, after their night together. How Rachel had shown up unexpectedly one afternoon, how her cold blue eyes had tracked Monica through rooms with new intensity. The way she'd asked pointed questions about Monica's schedule, her plans, whether she had family in Miami. "I felt like prey," Monica said, like she could smell something had changed. "Did she say anything directly?" "No, but 2 days before I left I found her in my room." Monica's voice dropped. "She was going through my things. When I walked in she just smiled and said she was making sure I hadn't stolen anything." Jonathan's hands curled into fists. "Why didn't you report her?" "To who? The agency that could fire me with one phone call? You? The man who'd already moved on?" Monica shook her head. "I realized I was completely vulnerable. And if Rachel even suspected what had happened between us, if she found out I was pregnant, you thought she'd hurt you. I thought she'd destroy me, legally, financially, every way that mattered." Monica's eyes met his. "I wasn't wrong, was I? About the kind of power she has?" Jonathan said nothing because they both knew the answer. "So I ran," Monica continued. "I emptied my savings, bought a used car, and disappeared. I've been looking over my shoulder for 5 years, Jonathan. Moving every 18 months, using different names for utilities, keeping the kids out of social media, living small enough that maybe, just maybe, I'd stay invisible. But you didn't." Monica pulled the crumpled letter from her pocket and handed it to him. Jonathan read it once, twice, his face darkening with each word. "When did you get this?" 3 days ago. And you think Rachel sent it? Who else would care? Who else would know? Monica's voice cracked slightly. She's been watching, Jonathan, waiting, and now she's making her move. Why? What does she want? Revenge, control, to hurt you through them. Monica gestured toward the apartment, where her children's laughter filtered through thin walls. Or maybe she actually believes she's entitled to them somehow. I don't know, but that letter isn't a warning, it's a declaration of war. Jonathan stood abruptly, pacing the small landing. I'll handle Rachel. You can't handle her. No one can. She's unstable, manipulative. Trust me, I know. He turned back to Monica, and for the first time, she saw something that looked like guilt. I should have dealt with her properly during the divorce, should have recognized how dangerous she was. But I took the easy route, paid her off, signed the papers, convinced myself that was the end of it. It wasn't. No. Jonathan's voice went quiet. And you've been paying for my silence ever since. The admission hung between them, heavy as humidity. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry I didn't look for you. I'm sorry I let you carry this alone. I'm sorry for all of it. Monica wanted to stay angry. Anger was safer than the alternative, the dangerous softening she felt creeping in, the old attraction that had never been about love, but might, with time and pressure, become something close to it. Sorry doesn't change what's coming, she said instead. As if on cue, Jonathan's phone buzzed. Then again, 3 messages in rapid succession. He pulled it out, and Monica watched his expression shift from confusion to shock to cold fury. What? Rachel. He showed her the screen, an email from his attorney, forwarded from family court. She's filing for emergency custody, claiming I'm the biological father and you're an unfit mother with a history of illegal residency. Monica's world tilted. She can't. She is. Jonathan scrolled through the document, his jaw working. She's arguing that as my ex-wife, she has a vested interest in the children's welfare, that you've been hiding them unlawfully, that I have a right to know my own children and she has a right to protect them from. He trailed off, but Monica didn't need him to finish. From me, she whispered. Jonathan looked up, and in his eyes she saw the thing she'd feared most, the machinery of power beginning to turn. The inevitability of men like him, men who could hire armies of lawyers and reshape reality to their preferences. This is what I was afraid of, Monica said, voice barely audible. This is why I ran. Omand, she won't win. You don't know that. I know I won't let her take them. Jonathan's voice hardened into something closer to the man she remembered. But Monica, you need to understand this fight. It's going to get ugly. She'll drag everything into the light. Our past, your legal status, every decision you've made. I know, and I'll have to acknowledge paternity. Publicly. Monica's heart hammered. I know. Which means, Jonathan said slowly, we're in this together now, whether we like it or not. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. 5 years of separation, erased by a single legal filing. 5 years of running, ending exactly where Monica had always feared, trapped in a courtroom with a man she'd once trusted for one night and a woman who wanted to destroy them both. When's the hearing? Monica asked. Friday. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for a battle that would decide the future of 4 children who still thought their father was in heaven. 3 days before everything Monica had built came crashing down, and somewhere in Miami, Rachel Pierce was smiling. The Miami-Dade family courthouse smelled like institutional cleaning products and broken families. Monica sat at the defendant's table in a borrowed blazer, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Beside her, the court-appointed attorney, a kind woman named Patricia Chen, who worked for fees Monica couldn't actually afford, shuffled through papers with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen this scene play out 100 times. Across the aisle, Rachel Pierce sat flanked by 3 attorneys in suits that cost more than Monica's annual rent. She looked immaculate blonde hair in a perfect chignon, cream-colored dress that whispered respectability, a string of pearls that probably had their own insurance policy. When their eyes met, Rachel smiled. Monica looked away first. Jonathan sat in the back row, technically a witness rather than a party. The DNA results had come back yesterday, delivered via courier in a manila envelope that had formalized what biology had already declared. 4 children, 99.9% probability of paternity. No room for doubt or denial. The results hadn't surprised anyone, but they'd changed everything. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Maria Santos presiding. Rachel's lead attorney struck first. His name was Douglas Whitmore, 60-something, silver-haired, with the predatory confidence of a man who'd never lost a case he actually cared about. He spoke in smooth, measured tones that made cruelty sound like common sense. Your Honor, we're here today because 4 innocent children have been deliberately hidden from their biological father for 5 years. Hidden by a woman who entered this country on a work visa, who overstayed that visa, and has been living in the shadows while raising children who deserve stability, resources, and the protection of their rightful family. Monica felt Patricia tense beside her. Miss Reed has worked tirelessly, Patricia began. Miss Reed worked as domestic help, Whitmore cut in smoothly, and engaged in a sexual relationship with her employer while he was still legally married to my client. When she became pregnant, rather than informing Mr. Pierce of his paternity rights, she fled, disappeared, denied him the opportunity to be a father. That's not, Monica started, but Patricia's hand on her arm stopped her. Whitmore continued, warming to his narrative. For 5 years, these children have lived in poverty, in a crime-ridden neighborhood. Miss Reed works 2 jobs, leaving the children in unlicensed care. One of the boys, Noah, was treated for a broken arm last year. The medical records show a 3-hour delay before Miss Reed took him to the emergency room. He fell off a swing set, Monica said, her voice shaking. I was at work. My neighbor called me and I left immediately. A 3-hour delay, Whitmore repeated, while Mr. Pierce, had he known about his children, could have provided immediate medical care, the best specialists, private health care. Patricia stood. Your Honor, Ms. Reed has been a devoted mother under incredibly difficult circumstances. Circumstances she created through deception and illegal residency. The words landed like physical blows. Monica watched the judge's expression, trying to read whether any of this was penetrating, whether the truth mattered when the other side could dress lies in expensive legal theory. Mr. Whitmore, Judge Santos said, her voice carrying a warning. Let's focus on the children's best interests rather than character assassination. Of course, Your Honor. Whitmore didn't look chastened, which is why we're asking for emergency custody to be granted to Mr. Pierce, with supervised visitation for Miss Reed until a full custody evaluation can be completed. These children deserve stability. They deserve a father who can provide for them. They deserve legitimacy. The word hung in the air like a slur. Legitimacy. As if her children were somehow less real, less valuable, because they'd been born outside the proper channels of wealth and matrimony. Jonathan was called to the stand an hour later. He walked to the front of the courtroom with the same measured confidence he brought to boardrooms, but Monica saw the tension in his shoulders. This was different. This was public. Every word would be recorded, dissected, weaponized. Whitmore approached like a shark that had smelled blood. Mr. Pierce, you had a sexual relationship with Miss Reed while she was your employee. Is that correct? Yes. While you were still married to Mrs. Pierce? Jonathan's jaw tightened. Technically, yes. My wife and I were separated. Divorce proceedings had begun. But not finalized? No. And after this encounter, Miss Reed disappeared. Did you attempt to find her? The courtroom went silent. No, Jonathan said quietly. I didn't. Why not? Because I convinced myself it didn't matter, that one night couldn't have consequences. He looked directly at Monica. I was wrong. Whitmore smiled. You were wrong. And 4 children grew up without a father because of your negligence and Miss Reed's deception. Children who could have had every advantage, education, healthcare, opportunity, instead lived in poverty while their father built a billion-dollar empire 20 minutes away. That's not, Jonathan started. No further questions. Patricia Chen stood for cross-examination. Mr. Pierce, now that you know about your children, what is your intention? To be their father, in every way that matters. And regarding Miss Reed, do you believe she's been a good mother? Jonathan didn't hesitate. I believe she's been extraordinary. She raised 4 children alone, with no support, no resources, and somehow they're healthy, happy, and loved. That takes a strength I'm not sure I possess. Monica felt tears threaten and blinked them back furiously. So you don't support Mrs. Pierce's petition for emergency custody? Absolutely not. Jonathan's voice hardened. Rachel has no legal standing and no relationship with these children. This isn't about their welfare, it's about revenge. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Rachel's expression remained serene, but her hands tightened on her purse. Mr. Pierce, Patricia continued, you understand that supporting Miss Reed publicly will damage your reputation, that the business community— I don't care. The words came out sharp, definitive. I've spent my entire life building a legacy. Let it burn. These children, my children, matter more than anything I've built or anything people think of me. Monica saw it then. The shift. The moment Jonathan Pierce stopped being the man who'd let her disappear and became someone else. Someone willing to lose everything. It wouldn't fix the past, but it was a start. When Monica finally took the stand, her voice was steadier than she'd expected. Yes, she'd overstayed her visa. Yes, she'd worked without proper documentation. Yes, she'd fled instead of telling Jonathan about the pregnancy. But everything I did, she said, meeting the judge's eyes, I did to protect my children, not from their father, from a system that would have seen them as leverage, as problems to be managed. You don't think Mr. Pierce deserved to know? Judge Santos asked. I think he had every resource to find me if he'd wanted to. He had investigators, lawyers, connections. I was a maid who disappeared. If I'd mattered, he would have looked. The truth of it echoed through the courtroom. And now, the judge pressed. Now, Monica's voice softened. Now I'm terrified, but not of Jonathan. I'm terrified of that woman, she gestured to Rachel, who has no claim to my children but wants to destroy their lives out of spite. I'm terrified of losing them to a system that values money over love. But I'm done running. I'm done being silent. These are my children. I raised them. I fought for them. And I will not apologize for keeping them safe. Judge Santos took 2 hours to deliberate. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. I've reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the DNA results. Mr. Pierce is unquestionably the biological father. Mrs. Pierce has no legal standing in this matter, and her petition for custody is denied. Rachel's face went rigid. However, the judge continued, I am ordering a temporary shared custody arrangement. The children will spend weekdays with Miss Reed and weekends with Mr. Pierce, pending a full home evaluation and psychological assessment. This arrangement will be revisited in 90 days. Monica's world tilted. Your Honor, Patricia began. This is my ruling. Mr. Pierce has a right to know his children. The children have a right to know their father. We'll proceed carefully, with the children's therapist providing oversight. Judge Santos looked at both of them. I suggest you two learn to cooperate. These children didn't ask for this situation. Don't make them casualties of your conflict. The gavel came down. Monica sat frozen as the courtroom emptied around her. Weekends with Jonathan. Her children sleeping in a mansion instead of their bunk beds. Eating meals she didn't cook. Living a life she couldn't provide. She'd fought so hard to keep them. And in one ruling, she'd lost half of them anyway. Jonathan approached slowly. Monica, don't. Her voice was hollow. Just tell me when you want them. I'll have them ready. She walked out of the courthouse into blinding Miami sunshine, and for the first time in 5 years, Monica Reed had no idea how to protect her children from the truth. That sometimes, love isn't enough. The first weekend began with a disaster. Jonathan stood in the marble foyer of his Coral Gables estate, 12,000 square feet of minimalist architecture and uncomfortable furniture, watching 4 small humans assess their new environment with the wariness of hostages entering enemy territory. Eli clutched a stuffed elephant. Noah's arms were crossed defensively. Ava held her book like a shield. Lila was the only one who seemed intrigued, her eyes wide as she took in the double-height ceilings and the curved staircase that spiraled upward like something from a fairy tale. "So," Jonathan said, trying for casual and landing somewhere near terrified, "welcome. This is your home too now." "We have a home," Noah said flatly. Monica, standing in the doorway with their overnight bags, shot her son a warning look. "Noah, it's okay." Jonathan crouched down to eye level, a gesture that felt both instinctive and completely foreign. "You're right. You have a home. This is just another place where you can visit, and maybe, if you want, we can get to know each other a little." "Are you really our dad?" Lila asked, tilting her head. The question shouldn't have hurt, but it did. "Yes," Jonathan said simply. "Mummy said our dad was in heaven." "I know. Your mom was. She was trying to protect you. But I'm here now, and I'd like to be your dad, if that's okay with you." 4 pairs of eyes studied him with an intensity that made board meetings feel easy by comparison. "Do you have a pool?" Lila asked finally. Jonathan almost laughed. Yes, I have a pool. Can we swim?" "Absolutely." "Then okay." Lila grabbed his hand with the kind of instant trust that made Jonathan's throat tighten. "You can be our dad, if only it were that simple." Monica left after extracting promises about bedtimes, dietary restrictions, and emergency contacts. Jonathan watched her drive away and felt a surge of panic so intense he nearly called her back. What did he know about children, about keeping small humans alive for an entire weekend? Mr. Pierce, his housekeeper, Carmen, appeared from the kitchen. "I've prepared lunch, chicken nuggets and fruit, as you requested." "Thank you, Carmen." He turned to find all 4 children had disappeared. "Kids?" Jonathan walked through the house, following the sound of whispers and muffled giggles. He found them in his office, Noah at his desk chair spinning in circles while the girls examined the framed photos on his credenza. "Is this you?" Ava held up a picture of Jonathan receiving some award, looking stern and corporate. "Yes. You look mean." Yeah, I probably was." Eli was in the corner, studying the spines of law books and financial reports. "Do you have any kid books?" Jonathan realized with sudden clarity that his entire house was a monument to someone without children. Chrome and glass and sharp corners, nothing soft, nothing safe. Nothing that suggested anyone under 4 feet tall had ever lived here. "Not yet," he admitted. "But we could get some. We could go to a bookstore. Right now, if you want." 4 faces turned toward him with surprise. "Really?" Ava's eyes lit up. "Really?" It was a small thing, but the way they looked at him like maybe he wasn't a complete disaster made something shift in Jonathan's chest. The bookstore trip lasted 2 hours and cost $600. Jonathan lost track of what they were buying after the first dozen books. The kids moved through the aisles like treasure hunters, pulling volumes off shelves, reading first pages aloud to each other, debating which stories were worth bringing home. Eli gravitated toward animal encyclopedias. Ava collected fantasy novels. Noah found a book about inventors and insisted on reading Jonathan entire passages about Benjamin Franklin. Lila picked books based entirely on cover art and whether the characters looked friendly. "We can't possibly read all these," Jonathan said weakly, looking at the stack accumulating in their basket. "We can try," Ava said seriously. He bought them all. On the way home, Lila fell asleep in her car seat, her new books clutched against her chest. Jonathan watched them in the rearview mirror. These 4 small lives that were somehow his responsibility now, and felt terrified and grateful in equal measure. Dinner was chaos. Noah refused to eat anything green. Lila spilled her juice twice. Eli asked 17 questions about where food came from, spiraling into an existential discussion about whether plants had feelings. Ava read at the table despite Jonathan's gentle suggestion that maybe they could talk instead. It was loud, messy, nothing like the silent dinners Jonathan usually ate while reviewing quarterly reports. It was perfect. After dinner, they swam. Jonathan had purchased bathing suits in a panic the day before, guessing at sizes. They mostly fit. He sat on the pool deck in his dress pants. He'd forgotten to buy himself swim trunks and watched them play. Eli swam with surprising grace, his movements careful and controlled. Noah cannonballed with reckless abandon, trying to splash his sisters. Ava floated on her back, staring at the darkening sky. Lila doggy-paddled in circles, singing a song she'd apparently invented about mermaids and pizza. "Aren't you coming in?" Lila called. "I don't have—" "Who cares? Come on." So Jonathan Pierce, Miami tech mogul worth $2.3 billion, rolled up his pants and sat on the pool steps while 4 children he'd known for 72 hours taught him the rules of Marco Polo. Later, after showers and pajamas and a bedtime that ran an hour past Monica's instructions, Jonathan read them stories, different books for different beds. Ava wanted 2 chapters of her fantasy novel. Eli needed his animal encyclopedia read cover to cover. Jonathan stopped at page 40 and promised they'd finish tomorrow. Noah asked for the inventor book, then fell asleep during the part about the printing press. Lila wanted the same picture book 3 times in a row. By the time Jonathan finished, it was past midnight, and he was exhausted in a way he'd never experienced. But when he checked on them one last time, all 4 asleep in the guest rooms, Carmen had hastily converted into kid-friendly spaces. Something unexpected happened. Noah had rolled over, one arm hanging off the bed. Without thinking, Jonathan reached down and tucked it back under the covers, adjusted the blanket, smoothed hair away from the boy's forehead. Noah stirred slightly, mumbled something that sounded like, "Dad," and settled back into sleep. Jonathan stood there for a long moment, hand still hovering over his son's head, and realized he was crying. By Sunday afternoon, they'd established a rhythm. Breakfast together, pancakes that Jonathan burned, but the kids ate anyway. A trip to the science museum where Eli nearly combusted with joy over the geology exhibit. Lunch at a pizza place where Lila charmed the waiter into giving them free ice cream. Then home for the art project that somehow devolved into everyone, including Jonathan, covered in paint. Monica came to pick them up at 5. The kids rushed to her with stories tumbling over each other, talking so fast she couldn't possibly follow. Jonathan watched her face soften, saw the relief and something else, maybe gratitude, maybe fear, flicker across her expression. "They had a good time?" she asked quietly while the kids gathered their things. "I think so. I hope so." Jonathan hesitated. "Monica, I know this is complicated, but thank you for letting me try." She nodded, something unreadable in her eyes. "They need you, even if it scares me to admit it." As they loaded into Monica's car, Lila rolled down the window. "Dad," she called, "can we come back next weekend?" "Dad." The word hit him like a revelation. "Absolutely," Jonathan managed. "Next weekend, I promise." He watched them drive away, the house suddenly cavernous and silent behind him. For the first time in his life, Jonathan Pierce understood what he'd been missing. The photo appeared Tuesday morning. Jonathan's assistant brought him the tabloid, her face pale. There, on the cover of Miami Insider, a grainy but unmistakable image of Jonathan and 4 children at the bookstore, taken through the window. The headline screamed, "Billionaire's Secret Family, Tech Mogul's Love Child Scandal." His phone started ringing immediately. Board members, investors, media outlets, his PR team in full panic mode. Jonathan stared at the photo, at Ava, showing him a book, at his hand on Eli's shoulder. At the moment someone had stolen and weaponized. His assistant hovered nervously. "Sir, what should we tell them?" Jonathan looked at the photo again, at his children's faces, at the life he'd been fighting to build. "Tell them," he said quietly, "that those are my children, and anyone who has a problem with that can go to hell." The phone kept ringing, but for the first time in his career, Jonathan Pierce didn't care. Rachel Pierce looked immaculate under the television lights. She'd called the press conference for Wednesday morning at the Biltmore Hotel, a calculated choice of venue that screamed old money and respectability. Reporters packed the gilded ballroom, cameras positioned for maximum coverage. Rachel stood at the podium in a powder blue suit, her expression perfectly calibrated between wounded and dignified. Jonathan watched from his office, the live stream playing on his monitor, while his PR team huddled in crisis mode around the conference table. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rachel began, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine, "I'm here today to speak a painful truth. My ex-husband, Jonathan Pierce, has been living a lie." She paused for effect. The cameras ate it up. 5 years ago, while we were still married, Jonathan engaged in an affair with our household staff. When this woman became pregnant with quadruplets, she disappeared. Not because she was afraid, as she's claimed, but because she and Jonathan orchestrated an elaborate scheme. Jonathan's jaw clenched. His attorney reached for the phone, but he waved her off. "Let Rachel speak. Let her dig her own grave." "For 5 years," Rachel continued, "Jonathan has hidden these children, denied them, paid this woman to stay silent. And now, only because he was discovered, he's spinning this narrative of sudden fatherhood. But I ask you, what kind of man abandons 4 innocent children? What kind of man lets them grow up in poverty while he builds his empire?" A reporter raised his hand. "Mrs. Pierce, why come forward now?" "Because those children deserve the truth. They deserve stability. They deserve a family that won't exploit them for sympathy or use them as pawns in a public relations campaign." Rachel's eyes glistened on cue. "I've known about these children for years. I've watched from a distance, heartbroken that Jonathan would rather pay for silence than do the right thing. It was masterful. Every word a lie, wrapped in enough truth to sound plausible. I'm prepared to offer those children what their father has refused them: a real home, resources, a mother figure who actually cares about their well-being rather than their publicity value." Jonathan's phone exploded with notifications, news alerts, social media trending, his carefully rebuilt reputation crumbling in real time. His PR director looked stricken. "Sir, we need to respond now." "Not yet." Jonathan's voice was ice. "Let her finish. Let everyone see exactly who she is." Monica was at work when she got the first threatening text. "Enjoying the spotlight? It won't last." Then another. "You should check on your kids." Her blood turned cold. She'd left them with Mrs. Rodriguez, her neighbor who watched them on the days Monica had afternoon shifts. "They should be safe. They were always safe with Mrs. Rodriguez." Monica called. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. Panic clawing at her throat, Monica told her supervisor she had an emergency and ran for her car. The 15-minute drive to Little Havana felt like hours. Every red light an eternity, every slow driver an obstacle between her and her children. She was 5 blocks away when her phone rang. "Mrs. Rodriguez." "Monica, thank God the police are here. Someone tried to—" "Are the kids okay?" Monica's voice came out strangled. "They're fine. They're fine. They're safe. But someone broke in. A man. He tried to take Eli. I had the deadbolt on and I screamed, and the neighbors called police and—" Monica didn't hear the rest. She ran 2 red lights getting there. The scene outside her apartment looked like something from a crime show. 3 police cars, an ambulance, neighbors clustered on the sidewalk, whispering and pointing, yellow tape across her doorway. Monica abandoned her car in the middle of the street and ran. "Ma'am, you can't—" An officer started. "Those are my children." She pushed past him and found them on Mrs. Rodriguez's couch. Eli wrapped in a blanket, despite the Miami heat. Noah's arm around him, the girls pressed against their sides. All 4 looked up when Monica burst through the door, and the relief on their faces nearly broke her. "Mummy!" Lila launched herself across the room. Monica caught her, then gathered all of them, checking for injuries, counting fingers and toes and heartbeats. "You're okay. You're okay. I've got you." "I was so scared," Eli whispered. "I know, baby. I know." "No." Mrs. Rodriguez, shaken but remarkably composed, explained what happened. A man had knocked, claiming to be from Child Services. When she wouldn't open the door, he'd tried to force it, started demanding the children, said he had legal authority. "He had a gun," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice wavering. "Not pointed, but I saw it. I screamed and locked us in the bathroom. The man downstairs, Miguel, he heard and called 911. A detective approached, notebook in hand. "Miss Reed? I'm Detective Martinez. We've apprehended the suspect. He's being questioned now." "Who is he?" "That's what we're trying to determine. He had no credentials, no court order, but he did have this." Martinez showed her a phone. The screen displayed a text message. "Take the children to the address below. Use force if necessary." The number was blocked, but Monica didn't need to see it to know. Rachel. The arrest happened live on television. Rachel was still at the press conference, taking questions, when two detectives walked into the ballroom. The cameras captured everything, her smile faltering, the confusion, then the moment they placed her under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping. "This is absurd," Rachel said, trying to maintain composure even as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I have no idea what—" "You have the right to remain silent," the detective said. "I suggest you use it." As they led her away, Rachel's mask finally cracked. She turned toward the cameras, eyes wild. "He did this. Jonathan set me up. He's trying to destroy me because I wouldn't let him hide those bastards." The feed cut abruptly, but the damage was done. The nation had just watched Rachel Pierce poised, elegant, wronged ex-wife transform into something unhinged and dangerous. Jonathan arrived at Monica's apartment an hour later. He found her sitting on the front steps, the children finally calmed and watching a movie inside with Mrs. Rodriguez. Monica looked small, exhausted, like she'd been holding up the world and someone had finally given her permission to set it down. "They're okay," she said before he could ask. "Shaken, but okay." Jonathan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Rachel's been arrested. The man who broke in was private security she hired off the books. He's cooperating with police, giving them everything." "Good. It's over, Monica. She can't hurt you anymore. She can't hurt them." Monica nodded slowly. Then, without warning, she started crying. Not the silent tears she'd shed in courtrooms or the stoic strength she'd maintained for 5 years, but deep, racking sobs that shook her entire body. Jonathan pulled her against him, and she didn't resist. Just let herself break in a way she'd never been able to afford. "I was so tired," she said between gasps. "So tired of running, of being afraid, of fighting alone." "You're not alone anymore." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Aren't I?" "No." Jonathan took her hands. "Monica, I know I can't fix the past, can't give you back the 5 years you spent in survival mode, but I can be here now. For them, for you. As what? As whatever you need. Co-parents, definitely. Friends, if you'll let me." He hesitated. "And maybe, eventually, something more. If you're ready, if you ever want that." Monica studied his face, this man who'd been both her biggest mistake and somehow her most necessary collision. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said honestly. "I know. I'll have to earn it. Every single day. And if I never get there, if co-parents is all we ever are, then that's enough." Jonathan's voice was steady. "Because whatever happens between us, those 4 kids in there deserve parents who show up, who fight for them, who choose them over everything else." Monica looked at the apartment door, where she could hear Lila's laughter filtering through. Looked at Jonathan, who'd walked away from everything to sit on these steps beside her. "Okay," she said quietly. "We try. Together." "Together," Jonathan agreed. And for the first time in 5 years, Monica Reed allowed herself to believe that maybe, Just maybe, the storm had finally passed. 1 year later, the house on Key Biscayne wasn't as grand as Jonathan's Coral Gables estate. No marble foyer, no double-height ceilings, just 4 bedrooms, a yard that sloped toward the beach, and a kitchen table scarred with homework assignments and spilled juice that no amount of cleaning could erase. It was perfect. Jonathan stood at that kitchen counter now, attempting French toast while chaos swirled around him. Noah was building what he claimed was a revolutionary pulley system using dental floss and action figures. Ava sat in the breakfast nook, nose buried in a manuscript. Her latest obsession was editing her mother's books before publication, red pen in hand like a miniature tyrant. Eli had convinced Lila to help him catalog shells they'd collected yesterday, though Lila kept getting distracted by their aesthetic appeal rather than their scientific classification. "Dad, this one looks like a unicorn horn," Lila announced, holding up a conch shell. "Technically, it's a gastropod mollusk," Eli said seriously. "It's a unicorn horn." Jonathan smiled, flipping French toast that was only slightly burned. A year ago, he would have had a private chef handle breakfast. Would have been in his office by 6 a.m., coffee in hand, already reviewing quarterly projections. Now he knew the difference between good burned and bad burned. Knew that Ava liked her toast extra crispy and Noah refused anything too soggy. Knew that Eli preferred his cut into precisely 4 equal pieces and Lila wanted hers shaped like hearts. Even though Jonathan's attempts looked more like abstract art, something smells good. Monica emerged from the hallway, hair still damp from the shower, wearing jeans and one of Jonathan's old Columbia t-shirts that had somehow migrated into her closet. She'd moved in 6 months ago, tentatively at first, keeping one foot in her little Havana apartment as an escape route. But gradually, toothbrushes had appeared in the master bathroom. Her books had colonized the living room shelves. Her coffee mug claimed permanent residence beside his. They still hadn't defined exactly what they were. Partners, certainly. Co-parents, absolutely. Something more that neither of them had quite found the words for yet. But they were building it. Slowly. Truthfully. "Good might be generous," Jonathan said, plating the French toast. "Edible is more accurate." Monica kissed his cheek as she passed, casual, comfortable. The kind of gesture that had taken months to feel natural. Edible is perfect. Breakfast was its usual controlled chaos. Noah explained his pulley system in excruciating detail. Ava provided feedback on Monica's latest manuscript revisions with the bluntness of a professional editor. Eli shared 17 facts about mollusks. Lila convinced everyone that unicorns were, in fact, scientifically possible if you just believed hard enough. Jonathan and Monica exchanged glances across the table, the kind of wordless communication they'd developed over 12 months of shared parenting. The look that said, "Can you believe this is our life?" And, "How did we get so lucky?" And "Please help me understand the pulley system because I'm completely lost." After breakfast, while Monica took Ava and Lila to their Saturday art class, Jonathan drove the boys to soccer practice. Not because they were particularly athletic. Eli spent most of the game examining grass patterns, and Noah treated it like a strategic war game, but because it was normal, the kind of mundane, beautiful normal that Jonathan had never imagined wanting. He sat on the bleachers with other parents, making small talk about school fundraisers and upcoming holidays. A year ago, these people would have recognized him, whispered about the scandal, kept their distance. Now he was just Jonathan, Eli, and Noah's dad. The guy who always brought orange slices and sometimes forgot to pack the team snacks. His phone buzzed. Not the constant barrage of notifications that used to define his existence, but a single text from Marissa Chen, the director of the foundation he'd established. "New family intake today. Single mom, 3 kids, just arrived from Honduras. Your story gave her hope. Thought you'd want to know." Jonathan typed back, "Keep me updated, whatever she needs." The foundation Nuevo Comienzo, New Beginning, had started as penance, a way to channel his guilt into something useful, but it had become something more. legal aid for immigrant families, childcare assistance, job training, housing support, all the things Monica had desperately needed and never received. He'd stepped down as CEO 8 months ago. The board had been apoplectic, shareholders concerned, analysts predicting disaster, but the company was thriving under new leadership. And Jonathan? Jonathan had finally learned what success actually looked like. That evening, they gathered for dinner on the back deck. The table was simple grilled chicken that Jonathan had only moderately burned, salad Monica had prepared, roasted vegetables the kids would mostly ignore, no staff, no formal settings, just mismatched plates and plastic cups because Lila had a tendency to knock over anything glass. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose gold. The ocean whispered against the shore behind them, a constant rhythm that had become the soundtrack of their lives. "Mom, tell us the story again," Ava said, setting down her fork. "About the playground." Monica and Jonathan exchanged glances. They'd told the story before, carefully edited, age-appropriate, focused more on fate and second chances than the messier truths of their beginning. "Which part?" Monica asked. "The part where Dad saw us for the first time," Noah said, "and knew." Jonathan reached across the table, found Monica's hand. She squeezed back. "I was driving through Coral Gables," Jonathan began, and the children leaned in, even though they'd heard this a dozen times, "and I saw this woman in a yellow dress." He told them about the playground, about 4 children who looked like mirrors, about the moment everything changed. He left out the fear and the custody battle and Rachel's cruelty. Someday they'd learn those parts, but for now, they got the fairy tale version. The version where love, complicated and imperfect, still managed to win. "And then what?" Lila prompted, even though she knew the ending. "And then," Monica said softly, "we became a family." "Are you going to get married?" Ava asked, her editor's brain always pushing for resolution. Jonathan looked at Monica. It was a conversation they'd had in quiet moments, late at night when the kids were asleep. No rush, no pressure. But the promise was there, hovering on the horizon like the sunset in front of them. "Maybe," Monica said, her eyes meeting Jonathan's, "when the time is right." "That means yes," Ava announced confidently. "Adults always say, maybe when they mean yes, but want to feel mysterious." Jonathan laughed. "Has anyone told you you're too smart for 8? "Frequently." As dinner wound down and the children drifted toward the beach to hunt for crabs in the fading light, Jonathan and Monica remained at the table. His arm draped across the back of her chair, her head resting against his shoulder, comfortable in the silence that had replaced the walls they'd once hidden behind. "Do you miss it?" Monica asked quietly. "The company, the power, the empire." Jonathan watched his children. Eli crouched in the sand with scientific intensity, Noah organizing the others into teams for some game of his invention, Ava reading by the water's edge, Lila dancing through the waves like she was negotiating with the ocean. He thought about the man he'd been, the cold penthouse, the empty achievements, the hollow victories that had felt so crucial and now seemed so meaningless. "No," he said simply, "I don't miss any of it." Monica lifted her head to look at him. "No regrets?" "Only one." Jonathan met her eyes. "That I didn't find you sooner, that they grew up without me for 5 years, that you had to fight alone. But we're here now." "We're here now," he agreed. As the sun dipped below the Miami horizon, painting the world in shades of gold and possibility, Jonathan looked around the dinner table at the 4 small faces splashing in the surf, at the woman beside him who'd turned his carefully constructed life into beautiful chaos, at the house that was too small and too perfect and finally felt like home. And he understood, with a clarity that had taken 43 years and 4 accidental miracles to achieve. This was the empire he was born to build, not measured in quarterly earnings or market dominance or the respect of men who valued profit over people, but in small hands, sticky with ice cream. In bedtime, stories read 3 times because Lila always wanted just one more. in soccer games and science projects, and the way Ava corrected his grammar with exasperated affection, in the woman who'd vanished from his life and returned to save it, in second chances he didn't deserve but had somehow been given anyway. This was legacy. This was success. This was empire, built not on power or control or conquest, but on truth, love, and the messy, miraculous alchemy of becoming the person his children needed him to be. Jonathan Pierce had spent his entire life building toward this moment. He just hadn't known it until now.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.